Good morning, everybody. Good morning, San Francisco time. Good afternoon, Paris time. Hello. And from wherever you're joining us all over the world, I'm delighted to be here with my dear friend, Kristin Louise Duncombe. And if you're just joining us online, please hop in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from and how you are doing. We're so excited to have this conversation this morning. How are you doing, Kristin?
I'm doing great, but you know what? There's a technical problem. Your voice is echoing.
My voice is echoing.
There's an echo. And
Okay.
so you know what? It's unfortunate to do this, but maybe what I should do is log out and log back in because everything I'm saying is being repeated.
Okay. Do you
Okay.
maybe have this link open on another window in your computer?
I'm going to close everything and I'm going to open it right back up. I'm going to do it on Chrome and I'll be right back. Okay.
Excellent. Sounds great.
Bye.
Okay. See you soon. Hello, everyone. Oakland, California is present. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. And we apologize. We're having a little technical difficulty, but we should be right back in just a moment and ready to have this conversation. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us. I saw a lot of fellow Mount Holyoke alumni signed up to be here today. It's so good you're here. You're not hearing any problems with the sound on your end. So I'm hoping that perhaps Kristin had the link open on two sides because I don't hear an echo either. But we're so excited that you're here for this conversation. And let us know, have you read Kristin's book? This is the book this is the third book that she's written. And it's called Object. Hi, Lori. Thank you for being here. So yes. Now let me add you to the stage. How about now?
Oh my gosh, I think it's working this time.
Yay!
Oh my gosh. You know, that always happens. It's like with so many different technical things, it starts out wrong. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to close it down and start again. The middle-aged response to technical difficulties.
Reboot. Yes. Okay. And yes, we hear. So I was asking people if they have read the book, and we hear from one of our LinkedIn users. Yes, they have. Also, we are joined by now she is unable to hear me speaking. Not sure what happened.
Huh.
Okay.
Well, I do not know.
Okay, let me.
I hear you loud and clear.
You hear me loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe you can chat with the people. Do you see the comments on the side here that people are making?
No.
Okay, if you go to the far right and you look at comments,
oh yes,
on that button.
Oh my gosh! Hi, Lori. Hi, Wendy. Hi, LinkedIn user whose name is not showing. Oh, and now Wendy can hear you again.
Yes.
Yay! I'm sure that anyone that knows us from college days, they're totally laughing their heads off. They're like, "Oh my God, nothing's changed with those two flaky people."
Ooh, okay. Well, yes. So I guess why don't we start there with how we know each other, and maybe I'll share my earliest memory of you is meeting in a late night computer room, and you were so like I couldn't take my eyes off of you. You were so beautiful and funny and loud and intelligent. and
Oh my God. Well,
yeah,
you remember what I was writing a paper about?
it was a sociology paper. Oh, that was the other thing. So I looked at you and
Yeah.
I immediately formed an assumption that you were like a dumb blonde. Okay. and then and then you said what you were writing about.
Justification.
And I was like, oh my God, she's like brilliant.
That was a chapter in the book about how one of my best friends objectified. No, I'm totally kidding. No, but it's funny because I mean, I don't remember feeling very beautiful or brilliant, but I do remember the moment that we met because you were there being your very intelligent self talking about something political. And I was writing a paper on representations of lesbians in art in the Middle Ages.
Mm.
And I remember telling you that, and you were just laughing your head off. You couldn't believe it. And the problem was I couldn't find any information, and I don't think my research skills were very good, and I was so stressed.
Mm.
And that's my memory of when we met, the one and only time. And then that was at the end of our first year. And then it just so happened that fall we were both in Torrey.
Yes.
For
yes.
anyone who's not a Mount Holyoke person, Torrey is the dorm that we lived in. Oh my gosh. Hi, Keely. Keely McBride is here.
Yes. Keely's a professor here at the University of San Francisco.
Yes, I'm aware of that from recently having connected just briefly and seeing on LinkedIn. Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
So, yes.
So we are here to talk about our complex childhood trauma and how to heal from it as an adult. And I'd like to start there with when, Kristin, did you first become aware that you had experienced complex childhood trauma? And maybe actually before we go there, what is complex childhood trauma? And then when did you first become aware?
Well, let's remove the word childhood from it, just because usually, I mean, it's redundant to have to say it that way, because normally complex trauma is what takes place for someone in childhood. Okay, I'm stuttering a little bit because complex trauma can take place in adulthood, but for most people that have complex trauma, it's because they have undergone a series of repeated emotional, physical, or sexual aggressions in their childhood, which affects their development. So unlike, acute trauma, most people have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. When there's an acute trauma, like say a shooting or a bomb blast or a horrible accident, something like that, where there's an instant act of violence that overwhelms a person's senses. Complex trauma has to do with something that takes place over time and shapes the way they develop emotionally and mentally. And so the reason I was saying we don't have to use the word childhood to talk about it is that usually complex trauma comes from people's childhood difficulties. Although, of course, in situations, there are situations in adulthood that can also lead to complex trauma, but usually we just refer to it as CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
So when did you first become aware that you had experienced that?
You know what? I did not become aware that I had experienced that until very, very recently. And I know that can sound, it's like something that I have a lot of shame about. And I think I write about this. I do. I allude to this in the book, and I have spoken about it. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by a cat that is yowling. I don't know if it's coming through.
I can hear her.
Go away, Olive. She's so irritating. That's why I'm stuttering over my words, because I hear that yowling and it makes me afraid that she's about to throw up on myself. I'm sure anyone that has a cat knows why I'm having complex trauma from my irritating cat. No, I feel a lot of shame. It's something that I struggle with, that I feel shame that I am a trained therapist who has worked with plenty of people with complex trauma, but I couldn't recognize it in myself. And I think the reason I couldn't recognize it in myself, and I think what I'm about to say is going to be probably relatable to most people. Hence, I don't know why I continue to beat myself up about it. But it's like, you develop such entrenched coping mechanisms and such a defended persona that it's hard to see in yourself what the actual problem is. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really interesting. And it is fun to have so many Mount Holyoke women on the call here today, because I know, and I spoke about this with one of our dear friends from Tory days, who saw something that I had posted on Instagram, that picture of me naked in the ice chest. Mm-hmm. And I posted something like, I don't even remember what the caption was, but it alluded to, hilarity can be hilarious, but it can also be a cover up for something else. Mm-hmm. And I know that for so much of my young adult life, well, all of my young adult life, but then also going into my later adult life, I had that reputation of being like the fun one, the wild one, the one who was up for anything, the crazy one, the one who would get naked in the ice chest and do all that stuff. And it's important for me to be clear, like, I'm not there mired, like, oh God, it was actually horrible, and then I'd go home and sob. No, I mean, I was having a great time. It was hilarious. But I was so mired in that very defended persona of being the wild child, the one who'd had no shame about getting naked, the one who could just have sex with anyone in a bathroom stall at the dance. You remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
That was my persona. And I refer to that in the book. It was like, I was up for anything. And as long as I was up for anything, that meant that I was always in control of what happened. Mm. And so the original question was, when did I realize that I had complex trauma? It was after I left my marriage. And if you've read the book, you know that even though my ex-husband has many wonderful qualities and we're still friends today, I should never have married him. Mm. How can you marry someone that boycotts your country? And it's a really interesting comment to make right now, given that the country is going to hell and Donald Trump and all of that stuff. But still, you can't help where you're from. And marrying someone that took a fundamental position, not only against where I was from for political reasons, but that sort of hated all things culturally American, I think it was a blatant example of my own capacity to suppress the real me. Mm. Because I was busy being, his sexy wife and playing that role. And it was only after I dared leave the marriage, because I got unhappy enough that I just couldn't do it any longer. And I started going out with guys. I started meeting men, on Tinder. When I got married, internet was just starting. When I left marriage, we were already in online dating. And instantly, I was making all the same mistakes. I found myself on one date after another with guys I wasn't even attracted to, that for the most part, not, there's always exceptions, I found boring or weren't very nice to me. And I was turning myself into pretzels, trying to not be abandoned. And if I had included all the pages about all the guys I went out with after I left my marriage, this book would have been like 800 pages long. I had to whittle that down, because ultimately it was just the same story on repeat. But the main conundrum was, why am I bending over backwards to try to please people that I don't even like? And I am so terrified of being abandoned by people I don't even like. And having that awareness that those two things are true. I don't even like him. He's gross, bad breath, smells bad, terrible lover, isn't really nice to me. And yet the idea of being abandoned, when I say, abandoned sounds so dramatic. What I mean by abandoned is dumped, not called back, ignored. Those are abandonments. It was like, why do these two things exist alongside each other? And it was when that became so overwhelming for me that I started to realize, like, all those things that that you talk about with other people, that's you. You're not Miss Fun, loving, carefree, let's get naked and have sex and ha 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 ha. Like, you feel bad about yourself. And it was when I really realized just how much self-loathing I had. That is when I was able to, self-diagnose. But I was also working with a really great therapist. But interestingly, because I was living in Geneva at that time, and my therapist, we were working in French. So even in the book, those conversations that we had, I didn't even translate them back. You recreate things for the narrative arc. And I do speak fluent French, but I speak flawed fluent French. So I don't know, if she were to read this in English, would she be like, that's not exactly what I said? It's what I understood, though. And it's how I started piecing together.
And how did she break through to you, or what caused you to put that mirror up to yourself?
The main, I would say, turning point was when she asked me, and in the book, I included as one scene, but it was a conversation that we had multiple times. And she kept asking me, how do you see men? Because I would go in and tell her, like, I had another, like, complicated weekend in which I used either too much alcohol or too much weed to, make the date palatable enough. And I want to be clear, like, I wasn't so far gone that I was, that it was always completely horrible. But you know what it's like when you're not really feeling it with someone and you kind of like find a way to get through it. It was mostly that, but then there was also men that I went out with who either, had drug or alcohol problems and therefore were, had some anger management problems. Probably the biggest difficulty, I would say, were men that, you would be intimate with and then they would not call you back or call you like only at 11:30 at night. Just that sort of emotionally disrespectful stuff. And so many times, because my therapy sessions were always on Tuesday mornings, I'd go in on Tuesday morning and I'd tell her about like another weekend where something disappointing happened or where I, felt hopeful about something because I wanted to have a relationship, and how, I just ended up giving myself away. And she would kind of question me about it. And the question always came back to, she'd be like, how do you see men? And I was always like, I don't know, men. The conversation could go in any which way, like dumb, hairy, sexy, whatever. It just kind of depended who I was dealing with. But the breakthrough moment was when, for whatever reason, she asked, how do you see men? And it was like, I see them as the adults. I see men as adults. And she said, yes. So if you see men as adults, how do you see yourself? Because that is a very strange characterization for you to be making. And it was like, yeah, that's really where the dots connected for me. And I realized that this is the problem. This is why I keep spending time with people I don't really like, but fear the abandonment, and more than the abandonment, disappointing them. Because I think that's the thing that really drove me to try to always, be really great and wonderful to anyone, even if they weren't great and wonderful to me, is because I was so afraid of being a disappointment. And it's that child thing, when you're a kid, it's awful when the adults get mad at you, whoever the adults are. And it was when I realized I was doing that things really started to change rapidly. And things changed very rapidly for me. It's probably cliche to say, but it was extremely healing to write the book. But in order to write the book, I cleared everything away. I stopped dating. I stopped using any substances. And I just focused because I couldn't, there wasn't any way any longer to do the two things. And it's been really interesting for me because it's only now 4 years later, 5 years later, I started writing the book in August of 2020. So it's 4.5 years ago. I've only just recently started dating again. And it's been so fascinating, honestly. And I would love to know how this lands for you or any other women listening here, because I know for me, I have just had my first relationship post object with a nice person, an appropriate person. Like he did not do anything wrong or untoward. He's a very nice guy. And I ended it because I just realized that I wasn't that interested in him. And I found myself asking myself, what am I going to do to try to talk myself into this? How can I talk myself into like going to bed with him, even though I'm not really attracted to him, or calling him on the telephone because he wants to chat on the telephone tonight, but I don't really feel like it, So nothing major happened except for the fact that I listened to myself, and I've never done that before. So this is like, for me, it's all new.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Is that relatable? Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, that is very relatable to me. Yes. But, it's so sad to me to think of you as not feeling worthy, right? That you're constantly contorting and pretzeling yourself.
Yeah, well, that was the old me. And now the new me is no longer pretzeling and contorting, which is why, the first relationship I opened myself up to now, it kind of got packaged up neatly and ended, a couple of months after it began. But don't be sad. I'm happy. I am so, there's an expression in French. I don't think we actually have that expression in English, but it's better to be alone than poorly accompanied.
Yes.
How do we say that in English? There must be some equivalent, but it's true. I just love it. And even my own mother, she's 89 years old, and that's something that I didn't write in fact, I don't think I really did write about it in this book, but I know that I alluded to it in my first book, I grew up, I think like so many of us, at least of, in this age range, mid 50s, just getting this message like, you must find a husband. It is critically important that you find one. And I do want to be clear, I do not hate men. I love men. As I think most of you know, like I have a 20-year-old son who I just love more than anything. And I've met so many young men through him that are good guys. I don't hate men at all. I do hate the patriarchy and what it does to men, seriously. But the reason I was talking about my mom is that my mother still is like, oh, I wish you could meet a nice man. And she just wants me to have a husband. And I have started saying to her, Mom, I would be happy to have a partner in my life, but as long as it's not exhausting. Like, I don't want someone there just to have someone there. I want someone there if it really makes my life more delightful.
Yes. Yeah. And you deserve that.
Well, I think we all do. And men deserve it too. I mean, I think we all deserve to be happy.
Yes.
So
is that what you experienced, you viewing men as the adults? Does that mean that you saw yourself as a child?
Yeah. So let's go back to this concept of complex trauma. So, and I'll talk about it through the lens of what happened to me. So, if you've read the book, and I know you have, what you know is that when I was 10 years old, my best friend's father, who was also a colleague of my father at the U.S. Embassy in the Ivory Coast in West Africa, he began sexually molesting me. And, it was a different era, because it's hard to imagine that a middle-aged man in this day and age, with what people talk about now, could have so much access to young girls. But it started in 1979 and it went on for a couple of years. And what I can tell you is, for a couple of years, a couple of times a week, I had this middle-aged man sticking his hand down my pants, putting his hand in my bathing suit, pressing his big flabby crotch into my, just like all the gross things, breathing, sort of lascivious looks, comments. I mean, it was so normalized that I just, like, it was just what you just knew was going to happen, and you just got through it. And and the thing is, that guy had a lot of social power. He was extremely popular in the community. He played Santa Claus at the ambassador's Christmas party every year. He was like a guy in that whenever there was a holiday party, he was, singing the solo in the choir. I mean, he was like the quintessential cliche pedophile, buying the ice cream and the candy and the presents for the kids, taking us on outings. He was so fun. And it was extremely complicated because, well, anyways, I don't regret anything. You always think, oh, what could I have done better with the book? You do the job that you do, but maybe I would have added something more into this book about the fact that what was also complicated for me is that I loved him. Like, I had my own dad who, died almost 4 years ago. And I always feel anxious, like, oh my God, Dad, I hope you don't think, if you're listening down, I hope you don't think I'm saying you were a bad dad, because you weren't. My dad was a really good dad. He was there. He was a provider, and he did the best he could with what, you know, his life circumstances were. He grew up with a crabby alcoholic father, and he, as a consequence, was also a little bit crabby and not totally emotionally available. And so for me, Mr. Mulcahy's attention onto me and the way he played and made me feel like I was important, that was extremely, I'm loath to use the word seductive, because when I look back on that time, I did not feel seduced. That's not the right word, but through an adult lens now, I can say that was seductive. I was very attached to the whole Mulcahy family. You know, as I write about in the book, I mean, I was a kid with like an anxiety disorder, also totally undiagnosed. I had Tourette's, I had hypochondria. Like when we moved, I don't know if you remember this part of the book, but when we moved to the Ivory Coast, I had just turned 10, and I had spent the last school year in the States being bullied and made fun of, because I had this tic. I would go like this. I would sit there in class doing that, and kids thought I was super weird. Plus I had really short hair, and so everyone teased me that I was a boy. And like, so I was this weird girl boy. And, you know, I mean, you know how awful kids can be. And then we moved to the Ivory Coast, and suddenly, like, it was a really great little school environment, small. There just wasn't that bullying thing going on. It was very international. And then I got scooped up by Rose, who was this cool, sassy Pippi Longstocking type. And it was such a thrill to have a best friend. And I spent, you know, it was such a thrill to spend time at the Mulcahy's house, you know. And
because Rose, let's be clear, Rose is the pedophile's daughter.
She was the youngest child of 6. They were a big, you know, Irish Catholic family, and she was the only child still living at home. A couple of her older siblings would come and go from the States, and that's why, you know, we had access to her sister's record collection and the T-shirts. And, you know, it was just like that age. I mean, and let's take it back to the patriarchy, because all of us girls know what it is like to grow up learning about make yourself beautiful and attractive. And, you know, that thing happens. You go from just like sort of existing and not really thinking about what you look like to suddenly, I mean, it's insidious, but I feel like it starts slow and then it just takes over.
Yes.
Be beautiful. And if you're not, you are losing, and you need to compete. And I mean, and yeah, so when I think about that time, you know, I it's not like I wanted to have that type of relationship with Mr. Mulcahy, but it's like I just like put it, like I knew it was happening, and like just freeze, get through, and then get on with it and continue having fun, continue being the nice kid, continue being the agreeable kid. You know, I include a scene in the book about when I did resist and I kicked his arm. I don't know if you remember that. And then he complains, oh, my mother, and I got in trouble. I mean, that wasn't the only time something like that happened. But again, you know, when you're trying to like make a book legible, you have to figure out, okay, what do I include? So I only included that scene. There was a couple of other moments of resistance, and where I felt that I was in trouble with him. But it's not only with him. I mean, I think one of the major traumas for me, and this goes back to what we started with when my cat was yowling and I was having trouble just articulating what's the difference between PTSD and CPTSD. See, when the truth came out that Mr. Mulcahy had been like sexually molesting me for 2 years, and the lights were going on all over the community that it also happened to me and to me and to me, you know, the original Me Too, all these girls were like, yeah, it happened to me too. And the way the parents went to pieces, that was acutely traumatic. That was acutely traumatic. It wasn't complex, like developmental trauma. It was acute trauma in the moment. The adults literally going to pieces, the men crying, using words like rape, talking about, our vaginas, and like, that interview that if you've read the book, there's that moment that I get interviewed by the father of this kid that I used to babysit for. And he had me stick my finger up his sleeve. All of that was so unbelievably horrifying. I will never, even today, I feel it. I feel it in my stomach, remembering how it felt to be in the limelight about something so embarrassing. And the reason I'm mentioning that now is because that was acutely traumatic. But what I can tell you, going back to this thing we were talking about feeling like men are the adults and I'm just like permanently stuck in childhood, it's somehow all blended together, because I think back on that time and I remember feeling like I had absolutely no power at all. And it was, and then what the State Department did, the fact that it was covered up. And you want to know what also makes me mad, if I can just say this, like this is, and it's really hard to talk about this because I feel like it sounds like bitter pills. And well, maybe it is bitter pills, but it's beyond that, what I'm about to say. We live in this day and age. Well, I don't know what it was like before, but the publishing industry is tough. I mean, it's not easy. For the number of people writing books, probably only a teeny weeny eensy weensy percentage actually get a traditional publishing deal. I don't have the figures. I don't know. But as a result, then there's this industry that's developed parallel, which is self-publishing. Or then there's hybrid publishing, which is something, some midway. So now there's lots of options. If you don't get a traditional publishing deal, you can still get your book out there. And so this is the part that can sound like bitter pills. And I'm just going to grab the book and say it. I don't understand why no one fucking cares about this story, because I could not get anyone to represent me. For the traditional deal, you have to get an agent who then, I couldn't get an agent. It's like, why don't you? Are we still together?
Yeah, we're still together. Yes.
Why does no one think this is a big fucking story?
Which only further makes it feel traumatic that the quote adults
I just don't
are not paying attention or not finding your story worthy of being shared more publicly.
I just don't understand why, because I mean, and it's true that what one person said to me is, sexual abuse stories are a dime a dozen. And that is the unfortunate reality of living in the patriarchy. However, the thing about this one is that is U.S. government institutional collusion. And it's obviously not the only time that there's been institutional collusion. But
I think about the USA gymnasts. I mean, this went on for years. And they had alerted the FBI. And the head of the FBI was trying to get a gig after retirement with USA Gymnasts.
Totally.
He told them, don't worry about it. This is no big deal. I'm sure it will blow over. It was only because the Indianapolis newspaper got a hold of it that we would even know about this.
Yes, exactly. And see, that's another thing that I just find so, how to say it? It's so amazing because like, you know how you like, you don't know what you don't know. Like, I thought that the big act of I don't even know what the word is, like courage or revelation, was going to be to like tell the story and be like, okay, this is what happened. So here's the truth about me. Like, I'm actually totally fucked up, and like, this is what happened to me. And once the book came out, I didn't actually experience that. I just felt so like, more like indignant, like, yeah, I'm not fucked up. It is fucked up that all of this happened and that it continued to be covered up. So there was a lot of sort of healing in telling that story. But so the thing that you don't know what you don't know, what really has just, I don't even know how to say it. Like, it like brings me to tears, is the number of people that have written to me to say, I was also a victim of Mr. Mulcahy.
Oh.
And I have not been able to, and the thing is, those are people that are somehow on the periphery of the inner circle of people that are victims, that, you know, like Rose or my friend Francesca. I cannot imagine how many people don't know about this book and are victims.
Mm-hmm.
Because that man he was completely out of control, and he was given free access, you know, because he wasn't prosecuted. And so I think about that. I think about how, if he had been, imagine if he had been dealt with appropriately in the early 80s, when the story about what he did to me and the other girls at the US Embassy community in the Ivory Coast, imagine if he had been thrown in jail then and prosecuted. There wouldn't be all of these girls that followed, girls that hadn't even been born yet, that he got his hands on, you know?
And as you're saying those words, and we're having this conversation in the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition, I couldn't help but think about whiteness and how whiteness protected him. Like, imagine if he had been, you know, a Black U.S. Embassy official.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Imagine if he had been an Ivory Coast.
Oh yeah, 100%.
National who worked at the U.S. Embassy.
100%. And you want to know, that's the thing that, and I think I write this in the book. Now I can't even remember if that's included in there, but you know how I get that payoff, the $20,000 to apparently that was earmarked to cover therapy. That happened because 10 years after the fact, when my mom and dad were living in Nigeria, it was my dad's last overseas mission. A little white boy was molested by a Nigerian guard. So all hell broke loose. And the guy was fired, and the police came, and the child and his family were, you know, they were repatriated, and I'm not complaining about the treatment that they got for the sexual assault, but it's exactly what you're saying. If that had been Mr. Mulcahy, you know, white, privileged, it probably would have just been swept under the rug again, or not. 10 years on, maybe some things had changed, I don't know, but I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Yeah.
We have so many interesting comments and questions coming in. So,
let's see.
Lori asks, is it cultural or generational that women have these epiphanies in their late 40s, early 50s? And how do we help younger women reach these epiphanies at a younger age?
Do you have an opinion about that, or do you want me to answer, or what?
Sure. I mean, I would say in my own case, like, I did not think of myself as a rape survivor. Like, I had basically blocked that out from my memory, right? I didn't think about
The
it.
event or the fact that it was actually traumatic?
I think both.
Okay.
Yeah. Until, around the time of the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. So I was already, protesting Brett Kavanaugh on a personal level.
Mhm.
I mean, on a political level, before we had ever heard the name Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. But then when we did hear her name and the story, I was like, oh yeah, that happened to me.
Mhm.
And I had sort of blocked it out, and I didn't think of myself as a rape survivor. But rape like that is pervasive
Yeah.
in white culture. Then when I started talking about this publicly, people started sharing their stories with me. Um, eh, Going on in our same high school to this day.
Mhm.
This kind of boy athletes are able to do whatever they want, and there's no accountability, even when the parents of the girl stand up for the girl and say, hey, you can't do this. And
Mhm.
now in this age of social media, it's even worse.
Mhm. Mhm. So, I mean, I agree with you about all of that, and the thing that I would also add to what Lori's bringing up is that the thing that I find extremely disturbing, and I think this can affect, all of us, regardless of how old we are at the time, but the difference between us at this age and younger women now is that when we were young, we didn't have online porn. And the thing that I find with so many young women, like maybe all young women, is that they are dealing with men who have learned how to have sex from watching porn. And they also have learned about how to show up sexually from watching porn. So
Mhm.
I feel that the porn industry has created a new generation of people where for women it is extremely performative, which is something that us women have, I think, done over the ages anyways to get through things. I'm not saying that good sex doesn't exist. Like, good sex does exist, and but I think if you look at porn, most porn does not really depict what is good sex for women. And like, one of the things that just blows my mind is the number of people. I mean, this is anecdotal. I have not done like a scientific study on it, but anecdotally, I have spoken to so many young women who now just incorporate into like the things that they do with guys getting strangled while they're having sex.
Mm.
And I always say, including to my clients, I'm like, do you actually want to be strangled? Like, I do not understand how that is delightful for you.
And I've heard about this as well, that this is a big trend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and then people, and you know how it is in this day and age, you can't say things because then, there's always going to be someone who's going to be like, oh my God, you're invalidating me. Because yes, I suppose there are some people in the world that actually do like getting strangled. But I feel like that more often, I think people do what they think they are supposed to do
Mm.
in order to be good enough. And so that's, I don't know, Lori, I feel like maybe, yeah, I don't think we're answering the question. We're just sort of complaining on and on.
Yeah,
But
but I think for me, okay, so going back to Lori's question, even though I've considered myself a feminist since I was 11 years old, and we went to Mount Holyoke and had this very affirming education, it took a lot of lived experience to get to the point where I could see the patriarchy clearly, because I'd so internalized patriarchal beliefs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
And when you were saying that you felt shame when
Mhm.
you were like, why didn't I know this about me earlier? That, Bell Hooks talks about how shame is the patriarchy's greatest tool, like
Mhm.
causing us to doubt ourselves, causing us to think there's something wrong with me, instead of there's something wrong with this whole system, with
Yeah.
this whole body of laws and culture of impunity and role models, and the way they all protect each other, the way they all have each other's back. And then, yeah, it's
Yeah.
very isolating. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
really think, I mean, this is why I'm such a huge proponent of interracial sisterhood, of having spaces for women to come together, to unite across race and generation and sexuality and class, all of those things, because we need each other. We
Yeah.
need each other to say, no, there is nothing wrong with you. There
Yeah.
is something wrong with this system.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to Tarana Burke.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful. And if you haven't read her book, I highly recommend reading it. I highly recommend joining the Me Too movement website. They have all kinds of healing resources for survivors on there. I'm so grateful to Madame Giselle Pellico
Oh, I know. Oh
and
my God.
and coming forward and saying shame should shift sides. Why are we ashamed? Like, we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Why
it's
are we letting them shame us
yeah, totally. 100%.
and shrink us? The other book that I highly recommend for
Mhm.
everyone, to really understand our intergenerational trauma as white women in particular, is The Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici. I don't know if you've read any of
Oh,
Sylvia
no.
Federici's books. So
No.
Sylvia Federici is an Italian um, feminist, Marxist historian. And
Okay.
The Caliban and the Witch is her history of the witch hunt in Western Europe.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
all about how, you know, prior to the expansion of capitalism, um, some women had some degree of power. Going back to
Mhm.
your point about representations of lesbians in medieval, I, I I think it was difficult to find them because I doubt there are very many depictions of them. But women were healers and ale makers and midwives and spiritual leaders, all this stuff. And there were the commons where we tended animals and crops together, etc. And then when they decided to turn it into fiefdoms and make everybody sharecroppers, basically, and no more tending the crops collectively. That's your little plot of land over there, that's yours over there. And oh yeah, you got to pay all this money to the lord who owns the land.
Uh-huh.
The women who were like, wait a second, that we don't like this, that what we
Yeah.
want, we liked it the way they called them a witch, and publicly shamed them, led them through the town stripped naked,
Uh-huh.
and then waterboarded them or burned them at the stake and put their kids in the front row to watch them burn,
Oh,
you
gosh.
know? And
Yes.
so
Oh,
our intergenerational trauma as white women of being like, if you resist, you will be publicly humiliated, tortured, killed.
mhm.
And then, if you align yourself with the most violent, you will be somehow protected from this violence.
Mhm. Yes. And you know what? That I think if we're going to put it along, what's it called? A continuum
Yes.
or a spectrum. I think that's why so many people then are like, yes, yes, it's okay if you strangle me while we have sex, because otherwise you risk being not sexy enough. And it's that same thing that I was saying earlier about the fear of abandonment, i.e. rejection, not being chosen. And I think what you're describing is the larger manifestation of that. But I think that the problem that makes the way I think us women contribute to the fact that the patriarchy and misogyny is ongoing is that there are so many ways that we remain hooked in the fear of not being good enough, chosen.
Pick me,
like me. And because it is indeed extremely hard to stop doing that. And so to go back to what Lori was saying, I mean, Lori, I don't know, it would be interesting to know what, any other woman thinks. I find that one of the things that has helped me a lot in my healing, now that I'm 55, is that it's like you just instantly are treated as invisible, at least by, there's a certain moment, because for everyone, it's probably different. I don't remember exactly when that moment was for me, but there was a moment when I still knew that when I strutted down the street, I was getting attention. And then there was a moment when suddenly not. And that's when you also realize the depth of it. It's like, oh my God.
And you miss it. You miss the attention.
You miss it and then you don't. Like I think it kind of depends. And of course we're all different, and it's, but it's interesting. And I think that once you no longer are, you can try, but when you no longer are getting that constant attention, I mean, I think we all know what it's like when we're young and we're constantly we're under the gaze all the time. When you get to this age, if you want that, you have to kind of work for it. And so then it's like, well, fuck that. I don't want to work for it. And then it's like, oh, liberation. Thank God I don't have to care any longer.
Yes.
And I think so for younger people, I think it's really difficult because it's not easy to not play the game. And I'm not saying that critically of women. I'm saying it critically of society. And I mean, I have this conversation. I'd love to know what other people think about this. And this is one of those things that, like, I'm so afraid to say it because I feel like it's one of those things that people could say that I'm like a misogynist or something, but I don't mean it that way. I mean, I love women and I want women to be okay. But anyway, so I've had this conversation so many times with my daughter, who will be like, Mom, that's so, like, how can you say that? But like, I'll see someone wearing something where they are like literally, like, you can just, like, have you ever seen those shirts where it shows like the under boob or the side boob or the super short shorts where you can see? And I always say that person is a victim of the patriarchy. And I've noticed that some people will be like, no, you should be allowed to wear whatever you want. And I agree. I think we should be allowed to wear whatever the hell we want. But then I think, and this is where I always end up getting into trouble with these conversations, I don't believe that anyone really wants to wear that. I think people wear that because that's what you're supposed to do to get the attention. Like, why? I mean, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Okay. I think about like that. What was that fashion brand? Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah.
And then all this revealing clothes, skimpy clothes for girls. And
it's because it's always for girls. It's like you never. There was such a striking moment because we were walking down the street. It was here in Paris. This was probably about a year ago, but it was the summer weather had come on. And there was these 3 young people walking in front of us. I was with my 2 kids. And there was 2 guys and a young woman. They all looked like they were in their early 20s. And the guys were all wearing these sort of billowy linen, like pants and long sleeve shirts with the sleeves rolled up and espadrilles. And the woman was wearing the teeniest little pair of shorts. I mean, seriously. And she had a great figure, but you could just see every last, I don't know what the terminology is for that, but like where the butt connects to the thighs, that part was fully exposed. And then she was wearing like a little skimpy, like halter top and high heels. And yes, she did look sexy and beautiful and all of that, but it was so stark. It was like, why are they totally covered? And she is literally naked. I mean, and I feel like we see that all the time. And there, it's just one example, but it's that thing, like we still are constantly being sold the message, or at least young people, that you have to be super sexy and dress provocatively. And I understand why people do it, because if you don't, then you don't.
Uh-oh, you are lagging just a little bit. Hopefully your internet comes back in. Can everybody still hear me? We are now going over the hour. Oh my gosh, there's so many more there's so many more comments.
Yeah, I'm looking at them too, because I suddenly lost you and I wasn't sure if what was happening when we.
Oh,
from Keely.
Thank you, Keely. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, Keely, I look forward to connecting more with you.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, you were a women's studies professor at Tulane. Oh my God, yes. Well, and I would love it if we could all have another conversation about women's studies.
100%.
Oh my God, Jessica, I didn't know that you were here. Yes. Choking during sex, or they too are brainwashed by the porn and patriarchal voice to think it is sexy. Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, speaking of another conversation, we have not given copies of your book.
Yes.
So we were going to give away, if you are still here and you would like a copy of Kristin's book, please type in the comment. I think we can give out 2 copies. Is that right?
Sure. We can give 3 copies. Let's give.
Yay! Okay, if you're still here, type in the comment your name, or direct message me, and we will get you the first 3 people to direct message me requesting a copy of this book. I will direct message you back with how you can obtain it. We are going to be doing another conversation about this in the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition Mighty Network, which I guess I should probably have that, a tab to that up, so I can hand it to you, or I can share with everyone how they could become a member of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition, so they can join us on April 25th when we will be talking about this again.
Yes. And I was just looking at, when we hang up, are we going to lose these comments, or are we going to, or do you keep a record of them?
We will.
I don't know this platform.
Yes, we will still have them. We will still be able to see them. Okay. So if you join us at the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition, oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Well, DM me, and we will figure this out. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Yes, thank
And
you, everyone.
Kristin,
Some of you, the names, it just says LinkedIn user, so I don't know who it is. So whoever I'm talking to, thank you so much for your interest. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, honestly. And Karen, thank you so much for having me.
oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you
Yes, it
so
was
much for
mine.
writing this book.
You are welcome.
It is so beautifully written. It
Thank
is so
you.
vulnerable. I love how you go from, you go from different chapters, or all different chapters of your life that are all interrelated, but you're going from the past to the present, and the places in between is so beautifully. It's just, you could not set this story down. It is so powerful.
Thank you. And actually, if I can just add one thing, because we didn't end up talking about it today, but I think this is something that's also so relatable to women. It's like it just doesn't stop, because as you know, like each section of the book, depending on where I was, there was just more assault happening in small and big ways. And that's what I think also happens to us women. It's like we just get so used to being preyed upon.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
That it becomes normal. Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Love you all. Thank you so much. I'm so touched that there's so many Mount Holyoke sisters here today. Thank you so much, guys, for coming.
Okay.
And yes, to be continued. Oh my gosh. Hi, Liz.
This is public. Okay. Yeah, please do not put your address in here, in here, because whatchamacallit, this is public. Okay. Just DM me. Don't put it in the chat. But thank you so much for everyone, all our Mount Holyoke friends, Wendy, Lori, Jessica, Keely, and I don't know who else might have joined us from Mount Holyoke. And please come part. Oh, Elizabeth Seitland, thank you so much for being here. Okay. To be continued. Love you.
Continued. Lots of love. Thank you so much, everyone. Big hugs.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.